The Universal House of Justice commissioned a documentary film for the 12th International Baha'i Convention in 2018, which it was later called A Widening Embrace. This film speaks about the community-building efforts of Baha'is around the world as seen through the eyes of local populations. So it was trying to give voice to the friends at the level of the cluster. For this project, 25 local media teams were identified representing different realities and contexts who, over the course of a year, will film the transformation happening in their communities.
Because the nature of the project was to capture learning as it was unfolding in the grassroots, it required local media teams, friends that were there who could document it as it was happening, and to empower them and help develop capacities that they could document that learning.
We learned that as a media team, we'll be filming key aspects of learning happening in the cluster in line with the current plan.
And so the aim of the film was to capture how a community, how groups of people, how individuals are learning collectively and together to apply the teachings of Baha'u'llah to bring about progress.
We learned many things in the process of making this film. One of them was that, while efforts were made to convey to the teams in the field the nature of the project, it still took some time to achieve this shared understanding. So, for example, communication alone, something like calling them and picking up the phone, wasn't always so easy.
Когда нам предложили участвовать в этом медиапроекте, с радостью согласились, но особо не понимали, что же это означает теперь делать.
I really don't think any of us
We were very confused.
had
we
any
didn't
idea
really.
what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, there was always a kind of a question of whether are we really filming the right things.
And I think it made it really hard for us to plan out our time.
Yeah.
Like even our meetings, we were trying to figure out what we were doing.
Yeah.
So.
I think sitting down with the board member helped us realize what the cluster was learning about, what the cluster was putting its energies in.
And we learned very quickly that we needed to do this process hand in hand with the cluster agencies, with the institute coordinators and the area teaching committee, auxiliary board members. So immediately we met with them and tried to map out over a period of time what the sequence of events, activities are happening throughout the cluster that would help us follow an object of learning.
Мы начали спрашивать и консультироваться с кластерными агентствами, но и также людьми, которые вовлечены в служение. Брать у них интервью, расспрашивать о деятельности, спрашивать, чему они научились после той или иной фазы.
El trabajo en el campo siento que fue de verdad muy importante para el equipo. Algunos visitábamos por alguna razón las comunidades, otros eran coordinadores, otros tenían su actividad de servicio. Entonces fue fácil para el equipo poder saber dónde estaban las actividades, cómo llegar a las comunidades, qué actividades poder filmar. Entonces de verdad ayudó mucho el conocer las actividades en las comunidades.
In the initial stages, we felt a bit uncomfortable taking the camera into the community because it seems like an odd thing to do. But gradually, as we started meeting more people, and when the community started to actually get to know us and know our faces and know that we actually live in the area and that we're not just strangers coming in to film, then we started bringing our camera more and more into the community. And it just seemed a lot more natural because they knew it was for a learning process.
Мы увидели, насколько это действенный инструмент, потому что когда мы передавали все научения посредством отчетов или каких-то записей, или каких-то рассказов, конечно, это трогало друзей. Но благодаря видео они могли еще стать соучастниками этого процесса, увидеть своими глазами. получается разделить радость, увидеть новых людей, увидеть озарение, увидеть эмоции. Больше как передать атмосферу и дух, который царил там.
Not only was the media team really trying to foster this collaborative relationship with the agencies, that we were just working shoulder to shoulder, but then also the media team became a bit of a lens through which the cluster agencies could see some of the activities in the cluster. One example was filming one youth in a neighborhood teaching his first children's class. And it was really eye-opening for the institute coordinators to see actually how quickly capacity was being built in these youth, and then how he was being helped to put into practice what he was learning. And then the institute coordinators, as they saw this, were able to take that footage and share it with other children's class teachers, with other tutors, so they could start seeing in practice some of the ideas we've been talking about for a long time, but actually happening in the cluster a few minutes from their house.
My first counsel is this. Okay, so with the quotation, my first counsel is this. So my first advice is this.
It was necessary to have a coordinating team responsible to collect and edit the incoming footage from the local media teams. Each team was given a specific theme to focus on, that it was based on the 29 December message. So another role of the coordinating team was to accompany these local media teams in this process.
And we studied together also to become very familiar with the guidance of the Universal House of Justice, major documents of the International Teaching Center, such as the Training Institute document. They could really help us and clarify our vision of what this film was seeking to say in regard to the 5-year plan. And so gradually we developed a collective vision, and when the footage would come in, we had the lens through which to view the footage.
For example, the revelation of Baha'u'llah allows youth to think about their identity in new ways, to develop a path of service that's coherent with their work and their family. What that looks like around the world and what each community is learning, gaining insight is different, but that framework comes from the plan itself.
जैसे कि हम लोग वहाँ जब योजना बना रहे थे तो उसमें बहाई बाल कक्षा को मेन फोकस था, और उसमें हम लोग टीम के साथ योजना भी बनाए थे कि प्रत्येक सप्ताह उस बहाई बाल कक्षा की जैसे क्लास से संदर्भित जितना भी प्रक्रियाएं हैं, जैसे कि बैठक, टीचर मीटिंग, उन कक्षाओं से संबंधित पाठ्य योजना या उन टीचरों के प्रिपरेशन, उस पर योजना बनाते थे और एक सप्ताह की ये योजना बनाई जाती थी.
L'équipe doit être en parfaite collaboration et doivent se communiquer entre eux, avoir vraiment, je dirais, être tout le temps en perpétuelle communication pour pouvoir bien fonctionner et pour permettre à l'avancement de ce projet.
पहले तो हम क्वेश्चंस ये सब जो हम पूछते हैं वो शायद हम पहले नहीं करते थे, लेकिन इसमें जो हमारी सीख बढ़ी है कि कैसे हम किसी प्रक्रिया को अगर कैप्चर करना है तो उसके लिए हम प्रश्न बना सकें, पहले से हम उसकी तैयारी करें कि कैसे जो हम बात अगर जो प्रश्न हम कर रहे हैं कैसे वो एक्टिविटी को वो सामने दर्शाएं.
One of the things that we learned was the more that the cluster teams focused on preparing the interviewee, working with them, talking with them, consulting about what it is, what were the insights that they really wanted to generate, they were able to create a much more coherent interview that then was more beneficial to the team in Haifa in order to craft that film.
This is microphone. 2 batteries, camera batteries.
C'était vraiment pas facile au début, oui. comment manipuler la caméra, comment donner l'interview à une personne, les plans, les arrière-plans, comment placer les micros, tous ces aspects techniques.
Because the project was working with local media teams, many of whom were comprised of young people or people with very little experience in film, not having a complex technology at the outset, but very simple handheld camcorders, a very simple recording system, allowed the teams to focus on capturing the story itself, on learning how to capture learning through film and how to tell that story.
To see these teams advance from that stage, where they were very apprehensive about the use of this equipment, to just a couple of weeks or a month or so later, to where they're going out and filming and sending footage to the team here in Haifa, it was really quite remarkable and showed a huge increase in capacity in a very short amount of time. This project had to adopt a mode of learning and flexibility right at the outset, and which was carried forward all the way up until the end. You can imagine these grassroots media teams around the world filming and documenting the learning in their clusters until the footage started coming in, and only then could the story start to take shape. Of course, this approach was not without its challenges as well. As a result of having such a flexible approach, the team here really couldn't shape the story in terms of editing until the very, very end of the process. Normally you know exactly what you're going to do earlier on in the process. Either it's through the form of a script or even a script treatment. But in this project, we kind of had an outline for certain things teams would be filming, but we didn't really know what they would ultimately film until we actually got the footage.
So that idea of how do you make the film and without a script, it's definitely not the way you make a film. You don't start without a script. You don't just have an outline. But in this case, it really seemed to be the only way to accomplish something this complex.
हम लोग को लगता था कि सीधा कुछ भी जैसे गतिविधि घट रहा है रिकॉर्ड कर लो और सेंड कर दो, लेकिन अभी जैसे जैसे वो वीडियो बनते जा रही थी तो अपने आप में एक कहानी बन रही थी कि कैसे यहाँ से मित्र जो है एक साथ मिलके जाते हैं और समुदाय में जा करके कैसे आमंत्रित करते हैं लोगों को कैंपेन के लिए और कैसे बहावला के बारे में बताते हैं और मित्रों को बुलाते हैं.
In the plan it speaks about how nuclei of friends learns to work together, right? And we didn't actually realize that that was what was happening until we looked back at the footage, because suddenly we saw all these new youth in all of our footage. Every day that we filmed, we saw these same youth. So we're thinking, oh, hang on, these youth were at the planning meeting, these youth were at the youth gathering. And so it seemed really interesting at the onset to see that actually we were doing something that was so emphasized in the plan without noticing.
So one thing that I see, like in general, talking about the media project, it is building also capacity in the cluster agents in following up their plans systematically. Because sometimes we have situations where maybe the cluster begins to follow a story, but maybe in the middle, you may end up leaving that story and begin maybe another activity. So sometimes you lose the learning that you had started. But we realize, like, with the media team, there's no way you can be cutting a story. You start another one. So, like, even the media team would ensure that, okay, this is something we're already following. Ensure that the cluster agency's plans pays attention to that, because we are following this now. So it has helped in showing that we sustain the processes that we begin to follow.
The idea was to describe how the revelation of Baha'u'llah is impacting the life of a people, and how groups of people are participating collectively in a process of consultation, of action, reflection.
मीडिया टीम जो वर्क कर रही है उसके लिए कि कैसे हम एक गतिविधि को लय के साथ देख सके और कर सके, जो हम इतने दिनों से करते आ रहे हैं उसको हमने देखा कि कैसे हम हमेशा विजिटिंग करते हैं, प्लानिंग करते हैं और फिर हम उन गतिविधि को करते हैं, मगर हमें पता नहीं था कि ये हम कर भी रहे हैं. बाकी जब हम मीडिया टीम के बारे में हमने सीखा कि कैसे हम इन चीज़ों को शूट करके फिर करना और फिर उसको समीक्षा करना और वो फिर हमें पता चलेगा कि हमने क्या चीज़ सीखा अभी तक.
The media team had to put in place this pattern of action, reflection, consultation, sometimes study, planning, action, reflection, consultation, action, reflection, consultation. So at times it was very intense, but that pattern enabled the team to function.
The teams would be in a rhythm of sending footage, at which point the footage would be reviewed by the team here, and it was a constant back and forth process with the team here at the World Center and the teams in the field. And through this process, the teams in the field learned very quickly, and the footage, as a result, became stronger and stronger throughout the project.
We knew this was a spiritual enterprise, so we made sure to pray together regularly, to deepen daily, and really draw on that inspiration. And I think this was a key factor in the process of finding that unity of vision.
A lot of consultation was involved throughout the whole project. Every single day the team consulted in terms of directions that would be taken, decisions that had to be made. Here, it was a team of people who consulted every single day, really tried to understand everyone else's perspective, and then came to a unified decision about the best way forward. While it was challenging and often took quite a long time, was also a very enriching process that allowed every individual team member to really learn and develop their capacity.
When I think about the whole process, I realized just how challenging what we were doing was actually, because we were creating a film, and what we were capturing from the field was constantly evolving and developing. And then, you put 9-10 people in a room, and each person comes from a completely different set of experiences and background, and they each bring their own perspective onto this thing that's constantly shifting and moving by itself. It's like we were trying to follow and have a unified vision on this moving, like constantly moving target.
The use of 10.2, the book on consultation, is an incredible resource and was extremely helpful for us in learning how to consult and how to share our viewpoints without being too attached to them. So despite the challenges that were found in the process, all the multiple challenges that were faced by the teams in the field and by the team in Haifa, the final film is really a testament to the unity of vision, the love for Baha'u'llah.
And the power of unity that Baha'u'llah talks about, the power of unity can illumine the whole earth. It also can allow a group of people to accomplish far more than they could imagine possible. And the degree of unity that the coordinating team had impacted the ability to move forward and how far things could go and how clear things became.
This was one way to capture learning that was unfolding at the grassroots, but also one has to recognize that there could have been other approaches to achieve the same objective. However, this has also provided beautiful insights. An important insight was that at the center of this process, there is this idea of strengthening our capacity for learning and to operate in a learning mode.
Those who are making the films are also actually part of the life of the population, and they themselves are also striving to contribute to its advancement. So in a sense, their participation in the film is part of the expression of their own journey. And so the degree to which they themselves are able over time to embody these spiritual qualities, the attitudes they show in the community also reinforces the power of these films to contribute to the transformation and advancement of the culture.
One of the lines in the film is it's possible for society to take charge of its own future. And so if you take the essence of what that line means and think, well, how is the process that went into making this film in harmony with that? You can see that these teams were in a process of telling their own stories. They were taking charge of telling their own stories. They received a little bit of training at the beginning, but in essence, they were documenting their own learning. They were determining what they wanted to film. So the point that the film was trying to make was coherent with the way the film was ultimately made.
When we are filming, we are focusing on the elements in the 5-year plan. Since the themes are going to continue, the idea of filming for us, we feel like it's a good idea to continue with it, following it until the end of this 5-year plan. Because then we know that the class is going even to evolve more, the activities are going even to evolve more, and we'll possibly have even more learning to capture as from now up to 2021.